Hey guys, checking out a 1977 JMP that has been pretty heavily modified by the legendary Dan Gower, based in the UK. This has got a lot of stuff going on, so we're going to go deep today. This will take a fair bit of time. A lot of options on this. This one's called the Killer Kali because it's just got a lot of mods, a lot of stuff going on this. You know, we've taken pretty much a simple, straightforward sort of amp in the JMP. You know, it does one thing really, really well. And this just transforms it into so many variables. We could do a JMP sort of super lead plexi sound. We can do like a JCM 800. We can then take it into that sort of hot rodded, you know, boutique modded amp sort of sound, and gain. This thing is just out of control. A lot of control over the gain and a lot of variations on the gain. We've got mid-shift switches, we've got saturation switches, got a depth control on the back, a couple of other things, and a glass and a feel control. So look, what we're going to do is go through everything. Let's have a look at all this stuff and see what it does. So you'll be familiar with the normal sort of JMP layout. Your presence, bass, middle, treble. This one we've got two master volumes. So it's not a channel switching amp, it is just two master volumes. In other words, it'll just take your sound that you've set up and you can dial in a second volume control, boost it for a lead, whatever you want. We've then obviously lost the 4 holes. So your JMP would normally come with 4 holes, and you can jumper the holes and all that sort of junk. This does some jumpering, but it's all internal push-pull switches. And so what we've got now is gain 1 and gain 2 on the front. They're both always in the circuit all the time. It just depends how much and whether they're jumpered or not. And then we've got this feel thing. So look, I've got the manual from Dan. We'll go through it all. We'll talk about what these things do, and we'll play around with it, see what it does. So the only thing I'm not going to touch today is the second master volume, because like I said, it doesn't change the sound, it just makes it louder or quieter. So what we're doing today is starting off with most things dialed up around about 12 o'clock. I think that's usually the common starting point. Saturation switch is not engaged, but we do have the mid shift set to neutral, so I'll turn that off. Thump on the back is also disengaged. So yeah, it's a pretty classic sort of sound, isn't it? Your presence, look, we all know what the presence does, so look, I'm not going to spend time there. Bass, middle, treble, nothing's been touched there. Does your normal stuff. So let's talk about the masters. So we've got a master volume there. So if you know the Marshall amps, master volumes didn't really start to come along until probably around sort of the late 70s. This is a 77 JMP. So this is all a little bit new for this amp. It does what a master volume should do. I'll see if I can keep it there just to get some a little bit of power amp distortion there. We might run at about 2 o'clock. So that's cooking without burning the house down, I think. Now, this is where things get a little bit interesting, is we've got gain 1 and gain 2. Now, I'll just check with Dan and his fabulous instructions here. So these are dual gain controls. They're always active. They're always in the system. Both of them are pull push. So gain 1 is based on the preamp section. Think of it as input gain. Gain 2 is slightly later in the preamp section. So think of it as preamp gain. So we've got input gain and preamp gain. I'll play with number 1 and let you see what that sounds like. And obviously if I turn it down, we don't get any sound. Up at the moment, but it is pulled out. Okay, so when I push it in, okay, so hopefully you hear a little bit of variation there. Gain 2, as we said, is sort of like preamp gain there. These are push-pull bright switches. Right, okay, push-pull bright switches they are. I don't know about you, I usually find the bright switch kicks in a little bit of tiny bit more extra gain in the top end. So let's see if it does that. Gain 2 now is sitting at about 10 o'clock. Again, I'll play around with it. So again, if you turn it down, you get nothing. So that's about 3 o'clock. I'll turn it all the way up just cause. Getting pretty gainy there. I don't know if I'd personally use that much, but you know, it's there if you want it. So the bright switch engaged. Turn it off. So I'm definitely hearing a bit more extra sizzle and gain in the top end there, as I expected. So look, what I'm doing at the moment, so that's both of them pulled out, so both bright caps engaged at the same time. And as you can hear, there is just colossal amounts of gain there. So look, I'm probably gonna turn gain 1 off, but I might leave the bright on gain 2. I personally have found running gain 1, the input gain, pretty hot. That just seems to work for me. And then gain 2, you know, I'll play to taste. It does tend to usually end up a little bit less, maybe sort of around 12, 1, 2 o'clock sort of area. So that's sounding pretty good right now. Then we've got this other knob here called feel. So the feel control allows you to dial in the overall feel of the amp, from tight, snappy to sort of more spongy, compressed. Dan says start out with the pot at 0 for the tightest setting, and then as you turn it up, it'll bring in a bit more thickness into the tone and a bit more compression. So let's try it out. So there's definitely stuff going on there. No push-pull on that one, just the feel. Like most things, I'm sort of leaning about 12 o'clock at the moment. Look, I'll go back to 0. Yeah, it's a little bit weak there, isn't it? I think that's sounding pretty good there. Now let's have a look at these mid switches and saturation switches. The mid switch, we've got 2 ways. It's currently not engaged, but we've got left and right. Let's see what Dan says about this. Okay, mid shift gives you the option to completely fine tune the mid range. To the right is a bit more of a classic Marshall boosted upper mid range. The middle section is engaged, so it makes it more of a slightly more mid scooped sort of EQ setting. And then left is a little bit more balanced. It sits between the middle and right settings tone wise. So let's try it out. We'll start on the left here. And then in the middle. And on the right. So subtle differences that I'm noticing there. I'm probably leaning towards the left, just personally for me at the moment. Then we've got the saturation switch. So saturation switch activates diode clipping. I don't want to assume that this is like the Friedman saturation switch, because I don't know how any of that stuff works, but I have heard Dave Friedman say it's a little bit like, remember in the olden days you used to have a loudness button where you could turn the stereo down, engage the loudness button, and it sort of brought some of the body back to the sound. Because obviously when you turn things down, you lose emphasis, you lose bottom end and a bit of top end and everything. So I think on the old stereos it might have been a bit of a mid scoop, sort of push the bottoms and the highs out a bit more, just to compensate for the lower volume. Again, I'm only guessing, I don't know for sure. So with the saturation switch, I heard Dave sort of explain it. It was a little bit like the old loudness buttons on the stereos. I don't know how Dan's works. It does include diode clipping, and it does have a volume drop. So it's definitely designed for playing really quietly. Master volume's currently running on 2 o'clock, so this would normally be killing everything in the room, and you probably wouldn't use the saturation switch in this circumstance, but I'll give you an idea of what it does. So again, it's got left and right. In the middle is clearly disengaged, and I'm sure you heard a fairly significant volume drop there. And so you would turn the master volume up a little bit to compensate for that when you're playing quietly. Let's see what it says. Left is maximum clipping. Right is medium clipping. So let's start on the right then. And we'll disengage. And we'll go left now as well. I can definitely hear, you know, a lot more gain happening there for sure, but you know, you'll get the volume drops. So that's just, it's the way it works. That's perfectly normal and meant to do that. Right, now we are getting to the stuff on the back, and this is where things get a little bit out of control. So we have something called a violence knob on the back, and I'll read what Dan says. Dan says the violence control is for adjusting the overall gain level in high gain mode. So it is a push-pull. It's clearly not activated at the moment, and when it's pulled, it activates high gain mode. So that's 4 gain stages. So we're currently running in 3 gain stages at the moment, and like you've already heard, it's a ridiculous amount of gains. So we've still got more to come. It's pretty incredible, and the amount of flexibility is really stunning in this amp. It's really fantastic. Dan's done a great job. So right, let's have a look at violence. And I'll see if I can turn this thing on. I'm going to back the gain down just a tiny bit, so I really want you to hear what this sounds like. So everything's running about. We'll make everything on 12 o'clock. So gain 1, gain 2, and the feel are all running at midday, 12 o'clock. That's not bad for gain staging. All right, violence is in. So again, there's a bit of a volume boost there, but definitely a lovely depth to the gain. Everything's articulate, it doesn't get mushy, doesn't get over compressed. It's just like more, and more is always good. So let's see if we can turn it up a bit and give you a bit of an idea of what it sounds like. I think it's sitting about 2 o'clock at the moment. Sounds fantastic. Let's turn it down a tiny bit. So this is about 10 o'clock. Still plenty of gain there. Really articulate, really clear. Just, yeah, mountains of gain there. So fabulous. I'm going to turn that off and just bump up the gain on the front because I can control it a little bit better. And then we have glass. Yeah, we've got a glass control on the back as well. Obviously we've run out of space here on the front, so Dan's put a couple of things on the back. I'll post some pictures in the video so you can see all this stuff, of course. Glass allows you to control the tone of the amp's power section. So when the control is set to 0, you have a slightly dark, smooth tone. And as you turn the control further clockwise, you can make the amp sound a little bit more brighter, and naturally, when you get a bit brighter, you get a little bit more aggression, a little bit more happening there. Dan says there's a lot of sweep in this control, and you can really fine tune the sound of the amp into almost any situation. Using a backline rented speaker cab, that might be a bit too bright or a bit too dark, the glass control will allow you to manage that and control that a little bit better. So, right, so glass I've turned right down as Dan suggested. This is a slightly more dark sort of sound. And I do notice a little bit of that sort of high-end clarity that we had before has maybe been subdued just a tiny bit. What I do like though is this isn't boosting bass to compensate. So it's not getting muddy in the low end. Great. So let's turn the glass up. We'll go up to 12 o'clock. This is glass now at 12 o'clock. And you'll notice I certainly hear a little bit more clarity now coming into that mid-range. Again, it's not getting really bright. It's not getting really piercing to the ears. And finally, all the way up. So really clear, which is great. So if you've got a dark, bashed old cab, this is where you go to just try and fine tune that power section. I'm going to pop it back to about 12 o'clock. So just, glass is always on as well. Finally, I think we're almost there. No, we're not there. We have a depth control on the back. The depth control, again, I'm not assuming that this sounds like the Soldano depth control, but we've got other amps out there with similar sorts of names on them. The depth control is a bit like the presence control, but for the lower end frequencies. So it does add a big sort of more modern low end to the amp sound. So let's have a look at the depth. Depth is all the way down. And that's probably a little bit more sort of more traditional Marshall-y sort of sound. A bit more classic, not massive amounts of bottom end. All right, depth is now at 12 o'clock. Definitely a bit more bottom end there. And now depth is all the way up. Probably a little bit too much for me personally, but if you've got a big loud cab that can cope with those bottom end frequencies, you can do it. You've got the ability to fine tune that there with the depth control. I'm going to go back to about 12 o'clock there. I think feels nice for me. Finally, we told you this was going to be a long one. Finally, we are at the thump control. The thump control is a push-pull switch on the depth control and allows you to switch between two different depth frequencies. So currently what we've been playing with is a bit of a sort of a low mid boost. When it is pulled out, it definitely goes into low end and much more into the lower frequencies. So let's try that. Now I've kept it at 12 o'clock. obviously I think this is changing the EQ landscape of the amp. You need to set it differently. So you might want to either roll back on the bass, or just do something different, because this is definitely changing the tonality of the amp here. Get some pretty big tones happening there. I won't turn it all the way up, but just to let you know that it's there. I'll pop that back in. We're back onto the depth control, so it's more of a low mid boost. Again, that's just personal, personal favouring. I like that sound. And so finally, we have a solid state effects loop in this particular amp. Really clean, really simple, does what it's supposed to do. That is the Killer Kali, modified by Dan Gower. I'll pop Dan's details down the bottom there. Highly recommend him. He does amazing work, as you can see. It's all great quality. Dan's been incredibly helpful. So a massive shout out to Dan. He's literally on the other side of the world, in the UK, and I'm here in Australia, and he's just been amazing. Really gone out of his way to help. And so get in touch with Dan if you're interested in this. Location is not a problem. He's used to shipping amps all over the world, can communicate online, and time zones don't matter and all that good stuff. He's got a lot of experience in dealing with people all over the USA, all over Australia, right throughout Europe, and even into Asia, I believe. So we'll finish it there. Hope you enjoyed.